Jay Heck, welcome to the Leader Farming Podcast. Man, it is an honor to have you here on our podcast. And you and I haven't interacted a ton over the years, but we've definitely traveled in the same circles, and we've been connected through several different things that we do together, or I guess uh, aligned in what we do. So we did recently connect face to face out in Colorado at an event, and I asked you to join me on the podcast, and I'm honored to have you here. I'm grateful to you're carving out some time to share with those that are listening. So, why don't you first off tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do. You don't have to say you're a chimney sweep here. Um, so, um, but yeah, and then we'll jump right in. So tell us about
Ye
Jay Heck.
yeah, well, it's great to be here, and, wanna say thank you for inviting me a second time because the first time I stood you up,
It's all
had you on
good.
my calendar, and somehow it just blew right past me. So, anyway, it is finally good to be here, and I did love connecting with you and hearing more of your story, getting to appreciate the journey that you've been on. Yeah, my name's Jay Heck. I'm living here in San Antonio, Texas. And I've had kind of a wild journey to get where I am, but I am the founder and the director of a ministry that's really focused on the heart of man called Being Sons.
Mhm,
And through that, I started off leading just kind of 4 day, very cultivated experiences for men in air conditioning, with a caterer at 8 o'clock and 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock serving meals. But what it's grown into is a menu of adventures that are kind of custom built for men, meeting them at various places in their journey. So I've got a one-on-one father-son adventure that I host for younger sons that are kind of entering their very early stages of manhood, just
mhm,
coming out of boyhood. Same thing for daughters, a one-on-one adventure for daughters. And then I've got another adventure for fathers with older sons who are beginning to really move into some of the more complex, some of the more difficult stages of the masculine journey. And yeah, I also, try and create some content that encourages and equips men who've decided that there's there's a journey that they want to go on with other men and with God. And it really all centers around our identity as sons of God, which was um, a big aha moment for me when I
mhm,
realized that the Christianity or the faith that I'd been pursuing with only moderate success or impact for many years, it was really about an identity issue that had been
mm,
left undealt with
mhm,
and unrecognized.
mm,
So it there was a lot of pain leading up to that, but the revelation is what unlocked uh, my current mission and calling.
mm. Yeah. Um, yeah, you're hitting on stuff there that we'll probably get into pretty deeper here in a moment. But yeah, so as I was alluding to earlier, that has been our mutual journey of, just becoming sons. And for me, uh of course, I talk about it here pretty openly, but we're both connected to Wild at Heart ministry out in Colorado. And just Morgan has been instrumental in both of our lives in terms of helping us navigate this journey and stuff. So for those of that are listening, just if you're interested in doing a little more research on what Jay has talked about, or what I'm talking about, just wildatheart.org or becomegoodsoil.com. And then, of course, your website, Jay, for the first tracks and first bloom, and why don't you share that with everybody here?
Sure, that's Trailhead is the father older son adventure. Yeah, those can be looked into. Just go to beingsons.com, beingsons.com.
Yeah, perfect. Normally I do something like that at the end, but I just felt like, here in this moment, people are like, man, that sounds really interesting. I might want to look into that, hit pause
Hmm.
and look at it, and then come back and listen. So let's um let's jump into this conversation about, becoming a son. And I think, as we talk about here on the Leader Farming Podcast, uh, is just this idea of a seasonal growth mindset, and how, I believe that God reflects in nature our journey of growth. And, our personal growth reflects seasons. And so many people interpret those seasons as different things, and they don't fully understand that they're growing in and through all of those seasons. And unfortunately, for this current generation, and for, I think, a lot of our listeners, we have a lot of younger folks that listen, that are um, typically restaurant workers and in the Chick-fil-A family. But they interpret those winter seasons in their life as something that may never end, and they get, depressed or anxious about it. And we're dealing with an epidemic of unfortunately, an epidemic of mental health in our
Hmm.
country right now. And so, just with those thoughts in mind, and the work that you do as you help fathers navigate this journey with their children, and then, of course, from your own personal experience and personal journey, what would you like to share with everyone today about your winter seasons in life, and how, looking back, you've learned from those things and grown, and see how God's at work in your life?
It's tough to narrow it down, because the concept that you are bringing into the light it's enormous.
Mm,
Even yesterday, I was just taking a walk in the woods and talking to a buddy of mine, and he's working in the coal mines a mile underground in Australia.
mm,
And I was telling him that I spent 14 years in rock quarries measuring stockpiles, and both of us look back on that season now and can say that was the toughest season, that brought both of us to tears at times, because we felt we were not doing what we had the talent to do, not doing what we had the desire to do, and it felt like a failure. What have
mm,
I done wrong to be where I am today? But now we look back on it as the most treasured
mm,
portion of our journey, because without it, there is no way we would internally have the peace or the joy or the perspective that we have today. And that's the season that transformed us. It shaped us and has given us a vision for what, um, you know, authentic manhood, and specifically what I am supposed to be as a man. It's helped differentiate me from all other men, which I used to compare myself to and be envious of. Now I'm me, and I'm happy to be me, and that's all very much the fruit of going through a season where everything well, a lot of what I thought mattered, apparently it really didn't matter.
mm,
The things that I thought were powerful were not very powerful. So this morning, as I was just reflecting on just the winter seasons, I had so many winter seasons. Well, I'll just say so many. I stopped at three that I could have chosen. um, but you asked to identify one thing, and I prayed, and the very first thing that came up was a season that I went through when I was in business during those 12, I think it was around 14 years of working in the mining industry. And I had an employee that I had worked with in years prior in another setting, and he was he felt like one of my best friends, one of the most trusted men that I could uh, bring on board. And my father and I had a company that we co-owned, and we were looking for our very first hire, which is a big risk, as you know. That's it's a big decision. And we brought him on, and several years later, he ended up quitting and taking some employees and going into business against us.
Mm,
And that was, I don't know that I have felt the heartbreak or the sense of betrayal
mhm,
uh, near so much in any other season as I have in that season. And it shaped me profoundly and took some of the things that were very valuable to me, and it kind of passed them through the fire. And, a lot of my core values today were formed during that season.
mhm.
So, and it's actually, I'm now in another winter season where I'm kind of having to go back and revisit the pain of that one, and in fear of repeating it, it's driven me back to God to say, okay, what lessons did we learn back then?
Right.
Are you with me? And because it feels like in the season that I'm in right now with the ministry, it's getting to be too much
Mm,
for me to do by myself. And so inviting another person back on again to
mhm.
help is a very tricky and scary situation for me. So, it's a conversation that's always going on internally and with God.
Yeah. So when you think about this potential for betrayal again, where does that take you?
It takes me, uh, well, first, what comes to the surface is the reality and the pain of isolation
Mm,
and loneliness, because that's the product of the fear undealt with,
yeah.
and that's the product of not taking risks. And,
Mhm,
as sons, we should be the biggest risk takers in the world, because if we
mhm,
really have a dad who does love us, will protect us, will provide, will watch over us, then, we're covered, we're good. It's kind of our superpower.
yeah.
And so I'm being invited to exercise that superpower. But the um yeah, the fear of betrayal, or of just ruining a good friendship,
Mm,
because
yeah.
in the past, my experience from my own family was having invited people in that were good friends, and then it just didn't work out, and then it turns out messy, and in the end you lost not only a colleague or a partner in something, but you lost a friend that you had
Mm,
before. So it's really tricky. It's
yeah.
really tricky. But there was a lot of gold that came from it. And it's been really good for me to sit in the lessons that I learned back in that season again, because they
Mm,
were significant. Actually, it's one of the most significant seasons of my entire life, to be betrayed,
yeah.
because of what it mentally, emotionally, and spiritually taught me.
I it's very just a visual image of it's kind of funny, but I think about winter seasons and like, you go through your first winter season and if you find yourself, naked and afraid, right? You're like, okay, wait, this ended, but I know it's gonna come again. So I'm gonna buy a winter coat, this time and
Mhm.
I'm gonna, I'm not gonna walk into this winter season naked and afraid, and And so as I think about that idea, like, as we go through things, I think God equips us and prepares us for future winter seasons, future endeavors, but in the same route, like, you are also you've learned from those experiences, and you also learn, like, you can't, like, just completely uh, become a recluse and revert and not take risk. And
Mhm.
so, even though it's challenging and scary, and the potential for betrayal again, like, that ultimately uh, it all works out, and ultimately there's, like, to use your words, there's gold in there for your heart and your soul. Um, and Yeah, it is tricky though. I was having a conversation with a young leader earlier this week, a new leader in my business. Um, and in fact, it was on Tuesday, and we were just talking about this idea of, he's a younger person that's being put in charge of, some people that are older than he is. And when you receive that title or position, you immediately kind of go to, well, I've got to have it all figured out, or I've got to know this or do that, and act like I've got it all together. But I was talking to him about, this idea of being transparent and vulnerable, but also this kind of going back to what you were just referring to in business and relationships, is this idea of trust. And I think in most cases, trust begets trust. And so when a person feels trusted, they actually come through with being able to be trusted. But I would much rather, and so I just love for you to respond to this. I would much rather live my life taking risk and extending trust than the opposite of that, which is living in a scarcity mindset of not trusting and not taking risk, um, and trying to control everything. What's your response to that in terms of looking forward to this opportunity that you have to potentially bring somebody else on board and into your organization, and um, yeah, so feel free to respond, and how whatever that brings up.
Yeah, well, I can't say that in my journey uh, that I see that it's late winter and early spring. Like I don't know that a month from now or 2 months from now, I'm going to have another person on board with me. But the issues and the fear,
Mhm,
uh, that's actually the bigger issue than
mhm,
whether or not to bring another person on. And there's multiple ways to solve a problem that I may not see at this point. I mean, right now, because of uh, the pain and because of how similar this situation feels to the situation that I was in many years ago prior
mhm,
to bringing somebody else on board. That's what I tend to fixate on. But what I actually need is God's creativity to come in and say, hey, you've got an internal problem and you've got an external problem. The external problem is that there's more for you to do than you can do by yourself. The internal problem is that you are not trusting me. And that's one of the reasons that you're doing more than you need to be doing. You're not resting, you're not trusting, you're too busy. Uh, let's talk about that. And you're also you're reluctant to bring on people because you probably made some sort of an agreement or a vow
mhm,
that that we need to deal with, because once you have one person helping you, you're probably going to start having multiple people help you, and you're that problem that quote unquote problem of a person is going to be multiplied. And truth be told, we're not here on this earth to build Chick-fil-A's or to build a ministry. We're actually here to love people and to be loved by people. That's it. So
Yeah.
really, how we handle people's hearts and inviting people into a larger story, which is hopefully what my life is all about. Hopefully everything that I do is really all about inviting people into a larger story. Well, I can't model that without doing it myself.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned in that season of being betrayed, hopefully this will circle back around. If it doesn't answer your question directly, then please help me get back on focus. But one of the things I learned in being betrayed, I asked Jesus recently, tell me a season where I felt closest to you. Just take me back, use my imagination. Let's go back in my story and take me to a place where I felt the most intimately connected with you. And he took me to the betrayal, which was a very unexpected. And it's because I had nothing left in me. It was so hurtful. It was so painful, so surprising, that all I could do was cry out to him and say, God, I need you to catch my heart. I literally can't even think. I can't take care of the other employees who've been faithful, who are still in that room. I don't know, all these questions are up in the air. I don't know if I'm going to lose my customers because they now have somebody else who's going to undercut my price that they already know and that they already trust, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I could go on for a long time. And what I found in that season was Jesus basically said, ask me about my experience being betrayed. And it was at that moment that Jesus went from being a story, a historical figure, to an actual human being. It was in that season that Jesus' humanity and him pressing me to ponder on his humanity, it was then that he actually became a human son of God, my older brother, teaching me how to be human in a broken world, relying on a really good father. And so in many ways, that was the launching point for me to live in the perspective that I have, and to realize that even Jesus, who's been betrayed over thousands of years, that's what the Old Testament's all about, is just humans betraying him, but in human, in his human presence. Here, he invited an employee into his service. We'll just say Judas, right? And he knew who it was. He loved him still. And there's the winter season of his betrayal. Jesus clearly had a winter season. And what came out of it? Well, he was crucified. And the whole world really needed Jesus to go through a dark winter season in order for the spring to come for all of us. And I think that as sons of God, that's something we have to embrace, is that my winter is going to turn into spring for somebody else. It has to. So, that's the way that I need to approach this decision right now. I have to take the risk. And another piece of that story, which I have found is very useful for me today, is that particular employee, when they resigned, is the only one that I completely forgot to give a non-compete agreement to, because I trusted this guy. So my mind was just still so in shock that I was losing this guy, that I didn't pull the piece of paper out and put it on the table. So when the betrayal happened, I wanted to shoot myself. I felt like the most ridiculously stupid human being on the planet. I caused it. I've got all these people saying, surely you must have done that. You've done it with every other employee. How did you not do it with them? What's the value of that? Looking back, I realized that I feel like God's protection and his provision for me is contingent upon my perfection. And you know what? We made it. We survived. We kept the great majority of our customer base. Um, we didn't have to malign. We didn't have to stoop down and do anything underhanded. We didn't have to um,
Yeah.
sling mud. We didn't have to do any of those things. And in the end, a couple of years later, I was able to sell my company because the Lord orchestrated it. And it was our good name and our good reputation in the industry that really was what people purchased.
Mm.
And they purchased it knowing that somebody was in competition against us. And that's what has helped me get to where I am today. So, another great fruit from that season is that no matter what you do, if you're doing it in partnership with God as best you can, even when you make mistakes, he's going to cover you. So that's of encouragement to me right now, really, because in choosing a team around you, trying to find the right people to be on the bus with you, you're never going to get it perfect. You're not going to be perfect. They're not going to be perfect. But if God's actually going to be there and he's going to turn everything into something good and glorious, well, it definitely gives you the courage to move forward anyway. So anyway, that's where I am processing right now, trying to discern what it is exactly that I need.
Mm. It's really helpful for me. There's two things that I just listening to you share that story for me. Um, Probably don't have time to go into both things that came to mind, but one of the things that came to mind for me was just this what I'm walking into right now personally with another restaurant opening in my community, and just the scarcity mindset that creeps in and be like, how many much sales am I going to lose, or my customer base, or um, my team members that live in on this side of the community are going to go work for that particular you know operator, and so like if I go to that scarcity place of of grasping and it's not a healthy place at all. But like my my history of going through winter seasons helps me get to a place of saying, you know what, I'm gonna I'm gonna trust. Like I'm just gonna extend I'm gonna stick my neck out there and just say,
Mhm.
I told this person, I said, look, I said, anything you need, anything, you just ask. And I'll help you.
Mhm.
And it's kind of like, man, did I really say that? Did I really say that? Um, and, but I mean, honestly, I'd rather live my life risk taking, and uh, with even allowing people the opportunity to take advantage of me than the opposite of that. Just living with a false sense of control, and trying to manipulate and control everything to my advantage. Um, yeah. So, man, this has been a good conversation. It's been very humbling to hear. This is the first time anybody's talked about betrayal on the podcast, and so I mean that's a strong word. It's a deep word that really takes a whole nother level of overcoming with winter. And as you shared, I mean, uh, Jesus got you through that and is taking you back to those places today, and helping you see the the uh, the image behind us, like the root structure that was created um, out of that will sustain you going into this next decision. That it's because of that you're able to make and take the next risk. um,
Mhm.
so just final thought on sharing with young folks that may be listening, or even anybody that I mean, just really, I feel like predominantly we're talking mostly to, we're fathers to many people that are listening. We're and I have this community of like-hearted men that have gone through a similar journey as myself, and I think that most people out there listening are much younger and want to learn from us. And so, what would you share with your 25-year-old self um, that uh, knowing what you know now and having gone through what you've been through? What would you like to say to 25-year-old Jay um, that may relate to those out there listening?
Yeah, I would say I would say two things. I would say something that I heard recently. There's a guy named Jay Wolf who, with his wife, have gone through tremendous trauma, and they wrote a book. And in it, he says, "You are God made you to do hard things in the good story that He is writing for you." And that is a mantra now that with my 18-year-old and my 20-year-old has become insanely important, because they're making the transition from life under mom and dad's roof to being in college. And it's not easy. The relationships are not easy, and the schoolwork is not easy, and the balancing of work and life and play is not easy. And yeah, I mean, if you can just anticipate the tension between knowing that God is for you and He wants to walk you through a difficult but very good story, then it begs that we ask the question, well, why does it have to be both hard and good? And it's because it becomes good because of the hard. You simply can't mature without hard stuff. You simply can't love well without learning how to love hard people through hard decisions, through tough circumstances, the difficult conversations, sticking by somebody's side when it's difficult, or realizing that somebody's going to stick by your side. And I think the second thing that I would say as evidence of that is that, like son, daughter, or young man, God made you to do hard things in the good story that He's writing for you. All you have to do is look at Jesus' life here on earth. God created Him to do hard things. And it says in the book of Hebrews that God actually perfected Jesus through the hard things in the good story that God was writing for Jesus. There's no way that Jesus, even though He was crucified, He was misunderstood, He was betrayed, there's no way that He looks back on His story and says that was not a good story. He is now being celebrated, and He was the most whole, the most trusted man ever to live in humanity. And it's because He trusted that God was making Him to do hard things in a really good story. So, the more you study the life of Christ, the more we are encouraged that whatever sticky, miry clay we may be in, that it's just good in the making.
I like that. Good in the making. That may be the name of this podcast. So, well, my friend, thank you for your time and for sharing your part of your story and for your wisdom. Just really grateful for that.